everybody, welcome back to another Main Street Celebration Bench Pillow Along video. We are in week 3. We're going to make the general store and the pickup truck blocks today. I have everything cut, prepped, ready to go. I talked about measuring batting last week, and in the launch video I went over selecting fabric. So if you're joining in on week 3, please go back and watch weeks 1 and 2. I'm going to work through some things a little bit faster. I also showed the threads in detail last time. I did want to share my gems came in the mail. I'm going to be using these instead of the fairy lights this time. I wasn't sure what size to order, and when I was in the craft store I couldn't find anything that looked right, so I ordered this bag online. It's got 3 or 4 different sizes. I'll be using a hot glue gun or some E6000 and gluing these on at the end instead of using fairy lights. I'll be using my 8x12 hoop today. We are adding background quilting to these blocks. I'll step you through that process again. And for my stabilizer, I'm using this HBI no-show mesh. It's extremely similar to Kimberbell's light mesh cutaway. I'm going to load the stabilizer in my hoop and we'll head over to the machine and get started. Let's go ahead and load our background quilting and our file. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. The book stand and the needle minder information is below the video. I'm using the 6x8 size for this block. This is the Stars 11 quilting file. I'll make sure that's linked below for you. Got that loaded. I need to find my general store block. These two are very similar. The general store is this one with the rocket across the top. Let's go ahead and add that. My machine automatically centers this. Last week, after I stitched out the first 2 blocks, we discovered that even though this is centered, it doesn't exactly line up with the background quilting. I had to make a slight adjustment with my trimming. If you haven't watched video 2, go ahead and make sure you watch that, but I'll probably do the same thing at the end. I may have to adjust the trimming just a bit. I'm going to go ahead and leave that center just like I did the previous 2 blocks. I'm going to go ahead and save that to my machine. This is the color I'm using for my background quilting. I'm going to go ahead and do the background quilting off camera. We stepped through that in video 2. We'll pick up together after the background quilting. The background quilting is done and I skipped through the placement line and the tack down, which we don't need because we've done background quilting. I show that in detail in video number 2 as well. We're going to start out with the building placement line. It says to use a neutral thread. I'm going to keep this dark navy on my machine and we'll stitch out the building placement line. I'm going to place my foundation fabric, cover that placement line, add a piece of tape, we'll stitch the tack down, and then we'll trim away the extra that's outside of the tack down line. Once you've got that trimmed, you can stitch out the building placement line. Let's cover that placement line with our building fabric. That's the white on white, white polka dot, white background. I'm going to add a piece of tape, stitch the tack down and trim. That's all trimmed. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the placement line for our roof fabric. Next, we're going to place our roof fabric. Let's talk a minute about the roof fabric. I cut my fabric for this a while ago. I cut this fabric yellow with that nice detail on it. It's actually not yellow, it's the brown. I happen to have the brown. If you cut the yellow and you don't have the brown, I actually think the yellow would probably look okay. You'd have to adjust the threads that do the detail stitching. But since I have the brown, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the brown. It's going to be easy. I apologize if anybody cut the yellow for that. I'll go ahead and use the brown since I have that, and I did put fusible on the back since this is an older project and didn't have background quilting, so everything's got fusible. Let's go ahead and tape that. I'll stitch out the tack down and then we'll trim. When you go to trim this, the pieces you want to keep are right here and then this upside down V right there. Everything else is extra. If you've got fusible on the back, make sure you put that on your scrap pile. You've got some nice big pieces here. I've got that all trimmed. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the placement line for our door. Let's place our door fabric, stitch out the tack down and trim. Next, we're going to stitch out the windows placement lines. It looks like that's going to be 6 little windows. One of the windows is on the door, and then you've got 2 on either side and 3 up top. Place our windows fabric. Make sure we cover all of those tack down lines. I'll add a piece of tape at the top, stitch the tack down, and then we have to trim everything around each of the windows. Once you've got all of that trimmed, we're going to stitch the siding details of the building. It shows the little gray square. I'm using sterling for that. This is the color that I have that matches sterling. I'm going to put that on and stitch that out. Next, we're going to stitch out the windows satin outlines. It shows it in the same color as the roof satin outline and beam details that we're going to stitch out later. I think this color is going to look the best for that. I have this written down as caramel. I think I may have called it camel last time. It's the brown. I'm going to go ahead and use this color for that. We're going to switch back to sterling and stitch out the window ledge fills. The next step is placing and tacking down the vinyl. I do have it cut, but since I skipped doing this on the windows on the firehouse, I'm going to remain consistent and just not do window vinyl throughout the project. If you want to do the vinyl, you would go ahead and place it, make sure you're covering all the windows. You've got the 3 up here, the 2 on the sides, and the 1 on the door. So don't accidentally place it like that because you'll miss part of the door. So make sure you cover everything, tape it into place. You'll stitch the tack down. It will tack it down along all the windows, and then you have to trim around each one of the windows. And it's a raw edge finish. There's no detail stitching, so you'd want to give yourself a little extra time to trim it up nice. I'm going to go ahead and skip that since I skipped it last time and move my machine to the next step. I'm going to switch to white and stitch out the building satin outline. It looks like it's just going to stitch out a little bit here and here. I'm going to go back to the color caramel and stitch out the porch railing fill. Next, we're going to stitch out the porch lights fill. I have 2 yellows. I have to decide which I think will look better. I think I'm going to go with the more yellow versus the orange yellow. I'm going to put that on and we'll stitch out the little porch lights. Next, we'll switch to black and we're going to stitch out the porch light detail. Switch to white, we're going to stitch out the porch pillar placement lines. Going to cover the placement lines with white embroidery leather. You want to add tape, make sure it's taped into place so it doesn't slide. Stitch the tack down and trim. There's no detail work with the embroidery leather, so take a little bit of extra time when you do your trimming. Trim it up nice and neat. Once you've got these trimmed, we're going to go back to caramel and stitch out the roof satin outline and then the beam details. I'm going to stitch the satin outline around the door. I'm going to use the darker red I have pulled. This is for Candy Apple. I'm going to put that on and stitch out that satin outline. Next, you want to switch to black and stitch out the door handle fill. It's really small. It's going to go really fast, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'll switch to aloe and we'll stitch out the potted plants leaf detail. I'm going to run those 2 together because this one is going to go really quick. Next, we're going to stitch out the little plant pots. I'm going to use the same color I've used here for the porch railings and the windows and the roof satin outline. I think that's going to look good. The next 2 steps are the flowers on our potted plants. It has this one here on the left in blue and then this one in red. That's gonna bug me. I have to have them the same personality quirk. I'm going to use my bright red and stitch them both in the bright red. I'm so glad I stitched them the same. That would drive me nuts just to have one blue thing here and then one red here. Let's switch to sterling and we're going to stitch out the foundation satin outline. Switch to white and we're going to stitch out the placement line for the stairs. The stairs are in embroidery leather, so add some tape to that. I'm going to trim some of these threads away. I'll tape it down and we'll stitch the tack down and then trim. We're going to switch to red and stitch out the rocket fuse detail. I'm going to use my darker red for this because the rocket has the glitter vinyl and this red matches better to the glitter vinyl than this red. Back to white to stitch out the rocket spark detail. Back to the red. This is the dark red for me, the one I'm using for Candy Apple. We're going to stitch out the placement line for the rocket glitter vinyl. Grab your glitter vinyl. Remember to peel off that plastic off the top. You want to cover the placement line, tack it down and trim. You can heat set it right away if you want. I'm going to wait until we're all done with the block and I'll heat set anything that needs to be heat set afterwards because we're also going to have some white glitter vinyl. We're going to switch to white, stitch out the placement line for the rocket tip, place our white glitter vinyl, tack it down and trim. Again, remember to peel away the plastic from your glitter vinyl. I'll go ahead and run all of those steps together. I just noticed something. When I see the placement line in red, I went with the red glitter vinyl. And when I saw the placement line in white, I went with the white glitter vinyl. I did the same thing last week on my welcome block. Do you see that? The rocket is red with the white tip. I don't know how I missed this. If you look at the picture, I guess I did it backwards. I'm really sorry if you wanted yours to look like this and I did it backwards in the video. I hope that's not a big deal for any of you. I'm so sorry about that. I'm going to remain consistent throughout because I'm going to repeatedly do that. I am so used to matching the placement thread to whatever fabric we're doing and tacking it down and not having opposing threads and materials. I actually prefer it this way because there's a white spark here and a white tip. I'm going to go ahead and get this trimmed. We're going to switch to red. I'm going to use the darker red. Again, this is the Candy Apple, and stitch out the red stars and firework explosions detail. If you want, you can use the other color red, whichever one you think is going to look best. Switch to white for the white stars and firework explosions detail. Next is the yellow fireworks explosions detail. I'm going to use this yellow. This is the one that has a little orange to it that I'm using in place of Glide Jubilee. The last thing we're going to stitch out are the eyelets. I'm going to use my really dark blue for that, kind of like a navy blue. Even though I'm not going to use the fairy lights, the eyelets are going to help me know where I need to place my crystals. We're all done with this block. We're going to move on to the pickup truck and we will do all the trimming together at the end. Remember to heat set your vinyl. Let's load our files for the pickup truck. I'm going to add the same background quilting. This one is the same size as the block we just did. I'm going to use my 6x8 background quilting. Go ahead and get that set. I'm going to hit add. We'll add our block. And then I'll do my background quilting off camera, just like I did before. And then we'll start working the block together after the quilting. Remember, after your background quilting, you're going to have the little mark here to step through and the box to step through. I'm going to save this to my machine and work through the background quilting. I've got my background quilting all stitched out. We're going to start with black and stitch out the placement lines for the truck tires. We've got our two truck tires here. In the instructions, it had us cut a piece of black embroidery leather 4 by 1.5 inches. I've got this little piece from the fire station where we cut out just the little tiny wheels. I think I can get these two truck tires out of that. When I grab my ruler, I can fit this whole circle with room to spare within 1 inch square. It's a little more comfortable if I have 1.5 inches. What I can cut from this is 1 by 1.5. So 1.5 down And you can see this is 2 by 1.5, and then I can cut that in half. So I'll have 1 by 1.5 and 1 by 1.5. I'll have some rectangles. That should work for this and save me from using a larger piece of leather. I went ahead and cut that. I've got 2 pieces, 1 by 1.5. Here's the circle. A little bit tight, but I'm comfortable with that. Just like that, slide it over. It's completely covered. And then I can put my tape on either side. That'll hold it in place, and I don't have to worry about stitching over the tape. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Center the tire on the skinny part. Right there, I need to get some tape and tape it here and here, and then I'll be ready to stitch the tack down. That worked out great. I don't know if you're like me, but I like to save on the embellishments if I can, because we can use them again in another project. I even have a couple tiny pieces that might be usable somewhere else. I'm going to go ahead and trim those. I've got those trimmed. We're going to switch to sterling and stitch out the tire, hubcap, and bumper fill. Those are all stitched out. The next step, they have us stitching out in a neutral color. I'm going to go ahead and leave this sterling on. It's actually going to be a basting stitch. It's going to be a placement line for the truck bed. Later on at the end, when the block is done, there's going to be a button that's put in the truck bed. Let me show you that. This is the picture on page 25. See the truck bed, and there's something sticking out of the truck bed. So the top of the truck bed isn't actually going to get tacked down. Let's go ahead and stitch out the truck bed pocket placement line. They have us making the truck out of the embroidery leather. It says to center it along that line. So go ahead and center that piece. Add a piece of tape, and then we're going to stitch the tack down. The tack down is going to go along both sides and the bottom. They show just one piece of tape here. I'm actually going to go ahead and add some on either side as well, just in case I don't want this moving. And there will be no stitching along the top, because that's where we're going to slide in the button. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to change my thread color. I started stitching the tack down with the silver, but I caught it. You might see there's some tiny holes. What I did was I took the tape off, I flipped it to the back, I popped all the bobbin stitches, and then I was able to very gently remove the stitching for this section. I took it over to my iron, flipped it to the back side. I put my iron on synthetic, which is the lowest setting, put a piece of fabric over it, and kind of did this with it. It almost completely sealed up the holes. I can still see them. I've relined up my fabric. I hand cranked the needle. Want to see if it's going to hit at the same spot. Looks like it's going to hit at the same spot. This should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and change to red. I would say pick whichever red you like best with the embroidery leather. The two colors of red they're using are Desire and Candy Apple. This is what I'm using for Desire. This is the Candy Apple. I think I'm going to use the brighter red for the truck. Here's the color number for this red. I'm going to put that on my machine and stitch the truck bed tack down line. Lucky for me, that worked out just fine. I can go ahead and trim. We want to trim outside the line here and then outside the lines here. It has us removing this basting line at the end, but since I have my seam ripper right next to me, I'm going to flip this over to the back. It's right here. I'm going to grab my seam ripper and I'm going to pop the bobbin thread rather than risk damaging the leather on the front. This will make it really easy to get the basting stitch out from the front. So we'll just pull these bobbin threads, and then I'm going to flip it back around to the front and just get the little seam ripper underneath and get that out of the way. That way I don't forget to do it later. Now I can trim my leather. Next we're going to stitch the placement line for the truck cab. Cover the placement line with your embroidery leather. We're going to tape it, tack it down, and trim. When you're trimming, be really careful because this is going to kind of overlay right here with the truck bed, and this part of the truck bed is open. So if you're coming down this way with your scissors, don't get your scissors caught on that. Be real careful when you do your trimming. I've got that all trimmed. We're going to switch to white and stitch out the placement line for the truck window. I'm going to use that permanent topping like we did on the window for the fire station fire truck. Let's go ahead and place that. Add your tape, and then we'll stitch the truck window fill and tear away the extra topping. It's all stitched out and I tore away the extra. I've got the clear vinyl here. I'm just wiping it off to make sure there's nothing on it, no fingerprints, dog hair, anything like that, any fuzzies. Hold it up to the light, give it a double check. I'm going to cover the window, add a little tape, stitch the tack down and trim. Got the vinyl trimmed. We're going to switch back to sterling and we're going to stitch out the next 3 things in this color. I'll run them together on the video. The first thing we're going to stitch out is the door handle for the truck, and then there's going to be a gas pump hose and nozzle detail, and then the placement line for the gas pump. 3 separate steps on your machine, but I'll go ahead and run them together. They're all in the same color in sterling. For the gas pump, they use embroidery leather. Go ahead and cover that placement line, tape it, stitch the tack down, and trim. We're going to switch to white and stitch out the gas pump panel fill. Going to switch to black and stitch out the gas pump meter details. Going to switch to red. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the bright red for this, and we're going to stitch out the gas pump lower panel accent line. Switching back to sterling, we're going to stitch out the gas pump base and top satin fill. We're going to start working on the rocket. We start with the rocket fuse, which is in red. I'm using the darker red like I did on the previous blocks. And then the rocket spark, which is in white. I'm going to go ahead and run those together since we've done a couple of these already. Next, we're going to stitch out the placement line for the rocket body. I already talked about accidentally switching the colors for that. Sorry about that. I'm going to remain consistent and use the red vinyl for the rocket body and the white vinyl for the tip. I'm going to go ahead and put my red on the machine, stitch my placement line, cover that with my glitter vinyl, tack it down and trim. Remember to peel away that plastic from your glitter vinyl. I'll go ahead and run those steps together since we already did this once on this video. The rocket body is done. I'm going to switch to white, stitch out the placement line, place my white vinyl, tack it down and trim. I've got that trimmed. I'm going to heat set that when we're all done before we do the trimming of our block. Next, we're going to stitch out the white firework, explosions, and star fill. Next, we're going to stitch out the yellow firework explosions detail. I'm going to use this color. This is the one I'm using in place of Glide Jubilee. Next is red. For the red fireworks explosions detail, I'm going to use the darker red that I used on the little firecracker rocket over here. The last thing we're going to do is stitch out the eyelets. I'm going to use my dark blue for that. I think I forgot to turn that on for the eyelets. Sorry about that. I know I hit the button, but I don't think it recorded. All the eyelets are stitched out. We've got some jump threads up here on the white, also on the yellow, and then there's some jump threads here on the gas pump. I'm going to go ahead and take care of all those jump threads, heat set the vinyl right here, and then we'll trim our blocks. We need to trim our blocks. They both trim to 6.5 by 8.5, which is the size of the middle rectangle in the orange pop ruler set. I've got my little ruler here to measure for that 1/4 inch. This one came out almost exactly centered. It's off by about a 1/16 of an inch, and we talked about this in the last video. I've double checked, make sure I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance there. I'm going to go ahead and trim this block. I'm going to set that to music. We went over orange pop rulers last time, and then we'll measure the block with the truck. Going to trim the pickup truck block. It's very slight, really minor adjustment. Double checking, making sure I've got 1/4 of an inch here under the tires and under the gas pump, that my side stitches are all lined up, and then I'll go ahead and give this block a trim. Here's both of the blocks trimmed. They do have embellishments. I'm adding all the embellishments at the end. Let's get a look at what we're going to be doing next week. Week 4, we're going to make the swing and quilt block and the farmhouse block. We have just 3 weeks to go. After we finish making Main Street Celebration, I'm going to start on the Autumn Acres bench pillow. If this is something that you're thinking about, I'll make sure this is linked below for you. I'll be working with the fabric and the embellishment kit as well as the background quilting bundle. Don't forget to join my Facebook group. I'll have that linked below for you. Please like, subscribe, share with your embroidery friends. Comments or questions, leave them below, and I'll be back next week for week 4 of our pillow along. See you next time. Bye everybody.